After an extensive and complex national security criminal investigation named Project Servant, the RCMP arrested and charged Awso Peshdary. Awso Peshdary provided financial support to facilitate travel to Syria to join ISIS.
And that was one individual that was rounded up, if you will. Awso Peshdary, though, was working with children. That wasn't part of the conference that came. Jonathan Halevi joins us, Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, because this guy was working in a school in Ottawa in an after-school program, right?
Yes, but it's not surprising. If you look into other imams, in this case it was not imam, but other radical imams in Canada who preach, for example, for killing apostates or killing gays, executing gays for just being gays. And they also run programs in schools, in private Islamic schools. And I give you an example from Alberta, from Edmonton. One of the imams in Edmonton, he was famous and was also broadcast here on Sun News with his anti-gay remarks. And these anti-gay remarks were said in front of students. And the previous imam of the same mosque, now he is based in Montreal, said he's also an educator. He said in one of his sermons that apostates should be executed. So it's not surprising. The connection between the imams, the mosques, and schools are well known.
But this, in Peshdary's case, this isn't just a school, it's within a mosque. I mean, it's the Pinecrest-Queensway Community Health Center, the Winthrop Court Community Health House, the Regina Sports Night programs that are there. This is in the average community, not necessarily a Muslim community.
Yes, it happens, and the issue here, whether the red flag that that the RCMP has on him, the information with regard to the investigation in 2010, and later with the complaint about domestic violence, whether all this information should be revealed to the employers. And I think that this is a very good question, because if he's not convicted, this information is not accessible, and that's why he was hired. So
Oh, I see. So these facilities did a police check on him, but nothing showed up on the police check because there was no criminal record.
No. So for them, he was just as fine like everybody else, and he was not convicted. So, and this is the main question. And the other question is those who have such radical ideas. What do you do with them? You know that they are radicals. On the other side, on the other hand, these are the exact tenets of Islam. So it's not just those who are radicals, which means chopping off hands, for example, or praying for Allah to give support to the Mujahideen around the globe. So you can find it, it's part of Islam. This is Islam. That's exactly what Islam is saying according to these imams. So what can you do as democracy to say them not to believe in the tenets of Islam? And I'll give you another example, just here at Dundas Square. Books, you know that, we have brought it to the Sun News. Books, they're being handed out to the public, to the Canadians, to non-Muslims, sanctioning wife beating in some cases, or calling for killing, executing the apostates in another book. So these guys are, preaching the principle of Islam publicly, and they have no criminal record. So you can do nothing about it. This is the faith of Islam.
So our laws need to be tightened up.
It's a big question, because we have freedom of religion. So where is the line? Where exactly you draw the line? They have the right for freedom of religion, and I think the important thing is not just the faith or the belief in Islam, tenets of Islam. It can be Jewish, Christian, or Muslims, but the issue of the dawah, which means dawah is propagating Islam. And according to Islam, this is a religious duty. It's not just believing in Islam, believing in the principle of the Islamic faith, but it's a religious duty, applies to every Muslim to propagate Islam. And the reason for that is to spread Islam around the globe and bring the word of Allah to be supreme. It's also here in Canada, which means, according this imam, is to bring about the Islamization of Canada, to make Canada Islamic. That's exactly what they are saying. I'm just quoting. This is part of the dawah. The dawah is to invite others which means non-Muslims, into Islam and changing the face of the country into Islamic, and to implement the Sharia law at the end of the day.
Okay, I do want to come back and discuss the Montreal situation because it does involve the imam, but we'll be right back with you, Jonathan. Don't go away. Well, we went from the discussion of what was happening in Ottawa with a individual that was under surveillance. It's now happened as well in Montreal, where the passport has been revoked of an imam there that goes by the name of Ali Shpiti. Jonathan Halevi joins me now. This is a different circumstance where authorities did step in and took away his passport.
Yes, and he's Shiite, he's not Sunni like other cases.
He's Shiite, as opposed to Sunni. Okay.
Yes, and affiliated with Iran and maybe with other groups, maybe Hezbollah, we don't know. We don't have any other information that can reveal what his connection are with other groups. But what is interesting, without referring specifically to this case, is that we know that Iran is involved in exporting terrorism globally. Just in the last few years, Iran was involved, Iran and Hezbollah, in terrorist attack against Israeli and other targets in, I think, more than 8 countries around the globe, from Africa to Asia to Europe. And we also know that a few years ago, here in Canada, CSIS uncovered a plot of Hezbollah to target Jewish synagogues. So there is, Canada is being used by Hezbollah and Iran as a source of fundraising money to these terrorist groups, Hezbollah and Iran. So that's why it's so important to look into all these details. And I think that CSIS, of course, is more substantial information about him. We also, just in the last few years, have been exposed to involvement of Canadians in terrorist attack. If you remember, in Bulgaria, a Canadian national was involved in the terrorist attack against Israeli tourists. And another Canadian was killed in the ranks of Hezbollah in Syria. So there is information about involvement and activities of Iran inside Canada in order to support terrorist activities.
Okay, and we've talked, well, there's a couple of points here. First off, as you pointed out, it's Shia as opposed to Sunni. So both factions of Muslim belief sponsor terrorism.
We see it in the Middle East. There is a sectarian rift between Sunni and Shia. There's a war in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, all around the Middle East. And
Egypt.
In Egypt, yes, there's 1 million Shiite in Egypt. And we have seen just a few years ago that Shiite were slaughtered in some cases. Because of this tension, and that also comes here to Canada. One of the imams, Shiite imam in Toronto, said it very clearly that a year ago, I think, there was a convention in a meeting in the U.S. in order to discuss these tensions in the Middle East and to try to curb the tensions that are not being transferred into North America. A few years ago, if you remember, in Montreal, there were clashes between Shiite and Muslim, and it ended with injuries.
Yeah. Is it fair to characterize the Shia terrorists or sponsored terrorists as anti-Israel as opposed to terrorists that inflict other people around the world?
There's different in the, first of all, there's no difference between the goals of the Shia terrorism and the Sunni terrorism in the long run. Both of them anti-American, anti-Western, anti-democracy. They share the same ideology. But they differ in the long-term, in the short-term strategic plan. And you see it in the policy of Iran. Iran right now is focusing on Iraq and around the Middle East, and especially the Gulf states, in order to dominate the Middle East. And they are very successful during the last few months. As you know, Yemen falls in the hand of the Shiite militia of the Houthis, which are connected and supported, financed by Iran. And that's why they are not involved now in international terrorism, but we saw it in the past in Buenos Aires and other places. And if you remember, in the early 80s, Hezbollah targeted the Marines headquarters in Lebanon. So they are all involved also in international terrorism.
But I am getting reports, for instance, that the Iranians are fighting ISIS.
Iranian fighting ISIS from different reasons, because ISIS took control of the northern area of Iraq, and it threatens the interest of Iran to take control, to dominate the Middle East. And for them, they don't want to see ISIS. They want to dominate the Middle East without, and to take control of other states, the Gulf states, Bahrain, for example, Kuwait, and of course Saudi Arabia. This is the prime target for Iran. And ISIS is an enemy, of course, not because Iran is a partner of the West and based on shared values. This is the opposite. But they are, in a way, pragmatic. They are ready to cooperate with the Americans, with their enemy, in order that the Americans will do the dirty job for them in defeating ISIS and bringing bringing Iraq and Syria to Iran on silver platter.
Okay, so then with this particular imam that we've been talking about where we started in Montreal, is he an active threat right now, do you think, in this country?
Not much was published by CSIS about his connection to terrorist organizations or to Iran. So we don't know. We cannot. I cannot just based on what is published to assess its threat to the national security of Canada. Just all we know that according to CSIS and the RCMP, he is a threat, and that's why the revolt.
And the Americans. The Americans have him on his their no-fly list as well.
So we have to predict that they have very solid information about his connection to a group that may pose a threat to the national security of Canada and the U.S.
Wow, and and this is a guy that's still standing up in front of Muslim gatherings.
And he also founded several organizations here in Canada in several cities. He heads one of the organizations in Montreal, and other organizations he founded in Montreal, Ottawa, and Western Canada.
Yeah, where he's getting financial contributions.
That may be the case.
Follow the money.
The money trail is very important in this case to see with whom he was in contact, where the money goes. And in other cases, we know that this is a crucial thing for not only for Shiite organization, but also to Sunni organization. Canada was used, if you remember the case of Khader, was used as a basis for fundraising money at that time for Al-Qaeda.
Wow. Jonathan, great to have you here.